Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on stage, Rui Prada. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on stage, Garrett Fredley. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on stage, Rui Prada. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on stage, Jamie Fristrom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on stage, Ian Livingston. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on stage, Jamie Fristrom. Ladies and
O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas.
Are you ready? Let's go!
A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia.
I wanna hear you say it. Come on.
O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude. O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas.
Are you ready? Let's go.
A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia.
I wanna hear you say it.
O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude. O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas.
Are you ready? Let's go.
A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia.
I wanna hear you say
O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on stage, Rui Prada.
Okay, thank you. So today I'm going to try to convince you and give you good reasons why games are important, why you should develop games and starting now. And I'm going to give you an overview of the activities that we perform at Technical on teaching and research that can help you on that. So the first thing I want to start is that games are great, and I hope all of you here agree with that. But I'm going to work on this to motivate you to why games are important for society and should be developed. So they have value. They have value for people and for society. What I mean by this, in general, games are seen as an anti-boredom and anti-stress pill. So you play games because you want some emotional regulation, or because you're stressed, or you want to have fun, or you just want to spend time. But this is not enough. There's a lot of things on games that are actually quite important for society. And one thing that games promote is this vessel for you to go deep into imaginary worlds and to fulfill dreams. Okay, this is for me, for example, playing Mass Effect was a great experience. I could travel around the universe, meet different species, explore planets. And these are things I cannot do in real life. So I can only imagine and dream of doing it. And games can do a lot of this for many people. So many different people have different dreams that you can fulfill part of that here. There are also mechanisms for self-expression, okay? Games can also help you define who you are, what you do. And this can be done together with your friends, so you can get a shared meaning of the things that you do. You can craft new worlds, create identity for yourself. And this is also why one of the reasons Minecraft is an awesome game and why my kids and lots of people play this game as well. But I want to stress more this one. So they also have cultural values in the sense games are good media to transmit values that you think are good or bad. They can also tell stories of heroes that we like. They can put the world into perspective, like this War of Mine does. So you can play and see the war in the perspective of civilians that want to survive this. So you can use games to make people think about issues on society and try to solve them as well. And of course, games are a big business. And they are not only a business for game developers, they're actually a business for players as well. They are a business for esports, for media, so lots of business around the games, and this is growing all the time. But this is not really something new for you. What I want to add is that actually games are also a good tool to solve problems, okay? For example, games are quite good at engaging people and motivating them to do tasks, perform tasks. And this is being successfully applied to healthcare, for example. If you want people to do repetitive, boring tasks for therapy, for recovering from disasters, for example, as you see in the jewel mine, so you can actually engage them into do these things and immerse them in an activity that they do perform correctly the task they need to recover. On the other hand, games are also about learning. You usually learn a lot about the mechanics and what you need to do to perform well in the game. And this is being applied for learning for many years. I really enjoy this example, Cellcraft, which is a very simple game. It's not new, old game, but where you play as a cell, and you have to survive this hostile world that has virus, that you need to look for food, and you need to construct the cell, and you understand how the organelles work, what their functions, how they work together for the survival of the cell. So if you, for learning practical skills in particular, where you have to explore and play and fail, games are quite impressive. And something that is actually also not very new, but it's being applied quite well, is to engage people in the crowdsourcing labor, let's say. For example, for citizen science. Foldit puts a lots of people to solve very complex problems of folding that are then used by scientists to explore new applications of this. There are other examples, for example, labeling images or classifying clusters of stars, galaxies. You find very examples that you have millions of people working together to solve problems for the scientists and to promote science and evolve. So there are lots of other typical applications of games. Okay, so games can have a serious purpose for health training, advertisement, news, productivity for your self-improvement of your organization skills, for example, or even art. But actually, this is not the main message I want to stress today. I want you to think of games as a tool for you. And I think developing games is an excellent activity for self-development. What I mean by this is when you develop games, you develop lots of skills, starting by the technical skills. And in this case, probably in your case, will be programming. And this can be in many different perspectives. Graphics programming, sound programming, network, and there's lots of things that a game can foster you to try and explore and learn. But it's a bit more than that, because your creative skills are also improved. Because you're trying to build something with a goal, with a design experience. Yeah, for fun in general. Do you have a message where you want the game to work in a certain way? And for that, you really need to push your creative skills to make it happen. You also need communication skills. You need to communicate to others what is your game about, especially if you want to move it into a business and you want to sell it or promote it. And also to communicate among the team. So you also need to communicate with others that have different skills, different strengths, because it's a highly multimedia medium. You need graphical design, music, storytelling, and so on. And this interplay with different perspectives improve you as well as a team member. And finally, something people don't realize that often, but especially if you do it in condensed ways, and very often you start to organize your work much better. So your organization skills improve as well with this. So if you think this as an activity, I see it like if you have some other hobbies like writing, drawing, playing an instrument or whatever, or a bit more like having a metal band, that you and your friends are creating something. So you should develop games with your friends as an activity for self-development in all these things I just mentioned. And if you do that, you actually are preparing yourself for the world that is coming. So my call for you, start developing games. Of course, you can do it as an hobby or in a career. You can later on go, and you're going to see some examples of people after that are going to tell what they're doing in the career. So you can still have a career or just do it for self-development, for fun, okay? And we have a few things here at Technic that can help you. So the first thing that you can do is look at the specialization in games. And this is a set of courses that you can select in the Masters in Information Systems and Computer Science, so MAKE. And they have six courses divided into 2 semesters. So the first one is on game design. And here we discuss techniques for design, actually what means to have experience, to have a game that promotes an experience, what should the player feel, what kind of players exist, what do they like. Our prototypes are important in the process, what creative tools you have to develop your ideas, and so on. We also have 2 more courses more focused on technology. One is related to computer graphics, where here you work on computer graphics programming, advanced programming, using GPUs programming, shading, texturing, and so on. And you also have artificial intelligence for games, where you learn the role of artificial intelligence for the experience, some techniques to make AI work in games for NPCs, to play games in general. And in the second semester, we have a course on game development methodology, which is a more broad project development course, where you develop a game from scratch until the end in a cycle and a prototyping cycle. So it's design thinking, user-centered design development applied to games. You also have media content production, because games also need this kind of multimedia, videos, images, text. So you study here, you can work with this kind of media. And autonomous agents and multi-agent systems, which is a technique from AI, which is a distributed technique where you have several agents working together to solve a problem. And this is often common in games as well. For example, for role-playing games or fighting games where you have teams of agents that you need to fight. And if you do that, in the end, you have something like this. Okay, this is a very cool game, very interesting, that was developed a few years ago by some students. And we have some examples from this year. I'm just going to display. These are just some examples of things that you can build in the courses. We usually have around 10 to 15 different games developing, and they are more mature in the second semester, but even in the first semester you can build something fun. We are really proud to have a collaboration ongoing with the Faculty of Arts of the University of Lisbon, which means that in these games you have a team that is composed by people from arts. Typical graphical design, but also 3D modeling, and with some luck, some sound as well. We also have an ongoing collaboration with the management department. So we are trying to put together teams that also include people that is concerned about the business model and the management of the game if it becomes a product. So how to position it in the market, how to sell it, how to get money and profit from it. And we believe this collaboration between people of different skills is actually quite important, and we try to do it as much as possible in the course. So if you take the specialization in games, you have the chance to work with these people. And usually it works quite well. This is a picture we take from all the teams in the end, and usually they really show the enthusiasm and the great work they did together. Also collaborate with companies, other institutions, and we're actually starting something now with the Faculty of Letras, which will bring people that are studying writing for games, for video games, and see how they can help in the development and the creation of the experience, and even the content, the writing content, if the game is very story-based. And so we want to increase the size of the teams and also the challenges, but to enrich the work and the teamwork that we actually develop in these courses. Okay, furthermore, so you can study games, that you can also follow and should follow us in the games lab. And there are some, and visit us in the Tagus Park campus and visit us in these links. So there we have a very interesting room where you can show some of the work that have been done, and the room hosts the development of games as well. People, mostly master students and some PhD students, are developing their ideas. There is a space that you can use to discuss games, to try, to play, and to show. And it's a quite nice room that I invite you to visit. But it's more than that. So the Games Lab is not just this room. We have a group of people that are working to promote games in Technico in general. One of the things we do is the organization of the site of Technico in the Global Game Jam. So Global Game Jam is a huge international event, usually in the end of January, where people meet together to develop a game quite fast. And these teams are quite multidisciplinary, and we have a quite successful site at Technico. So this year were about 70 people, many people that came from other universities and also from other, bringing other skills to the team as well. So the idea is to develop a game in a very, very short time, so 48 hours. It's impressive the things that can be actually built in 48 hours. You have to follow a team, so you also have an invited talk, an introduction to the team. This year was Repair. And as I said, you just join a multidisciplinary team to do the job in 48 hours. In our case, we have, some celebrations, some prizes with the support of companies like Miniclip. And it's quite fun. So pay attention to this next year. You need to wait 1 year because it's usually in January. Another thing we do right from the start of the specialization in games is actually the start of teaching in games in Technico that started, 12 or 13 years ago. We have an exhibition in the campus where everybody shows the games they develop through the semester. So this is, in part, the place where people in the course show the end results of the development of their games, but we also invite people in general from this community to present projects they are developing with their friends. The only condition we have is that they are students of Technico. Actually, it can be professors as well. We also have board games, different games, and people that come with the same game 2 years in a row just to show how it improved. And this exhibition gets some exposure from media. Also, people from game companies come and visit, and it's quite fun as well. So this year is going to be on 26th of May, so just invite you to go there. As I said, the idea here is that you can see what's happening in the game development scene, in technical. You can play the games, so try themselves. And by playing the games, you are actually helping the teams to improve the games as well. And this is part of the teaching side. So putting your game to the audience is a very important process. And of course, we invite you to show your game as well. Just send us a note and just go there. We often have workshops, invited workshops, so it depends on the opportunity. So last year we had Ernest Adams giving a game design workshop, actually 2 game designs workshops. We're planning to have a board game design workshop this year. I'm not sure if it's already settled. But we do often have these opportunities to invite people to present some extracurricular training as well. And one of the events I'm actually proud of, it's the Talk and Play. So Talk and Play is something that we organize at a regular basis, mostly during the semester, the teaching semester. But it's an opportunity for people to go to the lab, talk about games, the favorite games they play, something that intrigues them, something they don't like, for example. We had a battle on Pokemon, the last game of Pokemon. Someone presenting why the game was really good, someone presenting why the game was really bad. But the idea is actually to promote discussion of issues regarding games. It can also be a paper that you read that you want to share with others or to discuss. It can be a perspective, something that you think games are doing wrong or are doing quite well at the moment. It's really, really open. We also use this for master students to present the work they are developing in the master thesis and to get some feedback, or PhD. Or even us, I presented something that I played very, very, 30 years ago or something. So it is a place for sharing experience and try playing a bit and create a community around the games. And it's going to start soon, right? In March again. So the idea of this is that we have every 15 days a space where you can show and play and discuss things that you like about games, or, as I said, that you don't like. We do stream this on the Facebook page. You can actually watch the things that are already there, and pay attention to the media for the next ones. Another thing we do is try to have a good relation with the former students and keep them engaged in the activities of the lab and the teaching. For creating the sense of community again, but also to help for them to help us fixing the things that and our vision for the teaching and the activities, and for them to motivate new students as well. So this is usually in the first semester, around October, November, and we invite former students to talk about the experience, what they've been doing, the problems they faced when entering the industry, and giving some advice. It is quite informal as well. We show a bit of the things that have been developed in the lab. We also have snacks, of course, and a dinner where we have a very informal meeting to talk about several issues. So this year, this word invitees. So Antonio was a junior developer at ZPX, which is actually now FunCon as well. Nuno Fons is one of our seniors. He was working in the CD Projekt Red. He just was, wanted to come back to Portugal as well. And André is in the Splash Damage, so he went to UK to develop games. And we always have somebody, because we are fortunate to have people that have good careers in the game industry. And we do have something new. And this is also another invitation for you. So from this year, we started Game Dev Technical, which is a students club or started as a students club. And the idea is that students here are joined together to develop games. So if you want to develop games, you want to know more about, also contact these guys, check the Twitter, and they're actually in front, so just say, these guys, you should talk to them. And looking forward for this. They already developed a few things. So they had a participation in a game dev in the Global Game Jam, and they are exploring concepts with AR. I don't have the good video to show, but the game is quite interesting because it's a tower, kind of a tower defense game, where you also attack. And in AR, you need to pick colors to attack and build your own towers. So I could pick up blue here, black here, green, and then bring the colors to the towers to protect, to build your tower. And if you put the wrong colors on the tower of the other guys, we actually attack them. It was fun as you can see in this picture, they were playing. Just check the Twitter and you can see a video. But look at these guys if you really want to start now, starting to develop games, okay? Okay, I'm moving now a bit for the research, although the research and teaching are a bit together in the sense that we do develop a lot of master theses and PhD theses. They are more towards research, but they are part of the training as a student of technical as well. And I have 3 directions here to show you of some of the work I've been doing. And I'm showing more my perspective, but there are other professors involved. They have different things. They are a bit related. So the first one is applied gaming. So games that you can use for more serious purpose. And one of the things that I've been doing a lot is trying to use games for learning. As I said in the beginning, as games can actually be quite good at motivating and engaging people, they have these learning capabilities. And one of the simple examples we have is a game that we built for children, and I did this together with the civil engineering department here. And it's a game where you, as a child, have to face a situation where you have an earthquake. So in the beginning, you have to construct a kit. And this is just for you to remind kids or to tell them what are really important things they should care about in case of an emergency. And that's not their toys or consoles that they usually try to bring. It's more about food, water, lights, for example. And then they are placed inside this house, and things start to shake all around. And they have to find a place to hide. What's really interesting when we watch kids playing this is that they get killed a lot, and they love that. So they try to go to the balcony and say, oh, I'll fall apart. Then they go to the bathroom, and they are all cut with the glasses. Of course, this is very cute because it's for young kids. But what I mean by this is they explore everything they cannot do in real life. They understand that these things are dangerous. And they understand that if they put under the bed or under a strong table, that's a good approach. And we also force them to wait, because in this game, you have a second wave typically. So you have the earthquake, and if you just move too fast out of the house, you can be caught by the second one. So be attentive for this. Then there's a level with the tsunami, so that they can follow a bit all these disasters that can come through. And they experience, play with it, and get something to discuss at home. That's the main issue. So the game is being applied in schools for a few years. We're actually updating this version for new technology. It's quite successful. This one, let's see if it runs. How do I play this? Okay, this is a game that's been developed for Faraday Museum. I'll talk later. Okay, so the idea behind this is that you can improve a visit to a museum using this kind of technology, and games in particular. And in this specific case, there are lots of pieces that you can actually not touch because they are very old, like this telephone. So you can bring life, especially if you let people pick up and open the pieces and see what's wrong with them if you try to make it work. That's what you saw in the video. So you're asked by the game to try to make a call in the telephone, and then you try it and things are not working. So you need to open it and see that you need to fix the battery, and then plug the multi-filament. And so while you're doing it, you learn how things, you get some explanations and see how things actually are created and work. You get some information that collected in a book, and you learn more because you actually can play with the piece, and that's the idea. We are doing more for the museum, and in particular, they have experience. You can touch some of them, like an engine that you can rotate to produce some electricity and see how electric fields go with magnetic fields to generate rotation, for example. And we're using the same approach to give more information to people what's going on. So you can actually visualize the fields, the electronic fields, the electromagnetic fields, and learn more about that as well. And the idea is that it is a free experience, so you can move around and choose what to see first and what to explore. We also did another game for support teaching math skills and problem-solving skills, and that's Fristrom. The idea here, this game was also for young kids, for primary schools, 7 to 10 years old. And in this game, they have to prepare a party for 10 kids. They are invited. And they first need to understand what would be the theme of the party, and they have to check what the kids like. So they need to take a perspective of the guys that are actually going to take part of the party. But it's not only about that. They work in a team, and they have to structure the problem. So they have to define tasks to perform. For example, say we need food. We need to hire someone to be a clown or to tell a story. We need some furniture. So they need to consider what they need. They devise a plan, and then they divide it among themselves with a budget. So this is really about planning skills. So these kids have to say something like, I'm going to buy the drinks, you're going to buy the cakes, and you're going to see if you find some trampoline for the party. And then once they decide that, they go in another phase, which is a single-player experience. They all go into different places in the village to buy stuff and spend time. And then they come together and have to check if they actually perform the plan well. And it's impressive how they often do not. So they buy all stuff that they want, and then they are to come together, discuss what they did wrong, that they shouldn't buy, and only when they actually have a good set of things they bought that fulfills the planning, they can move on. And this is being used by math teachers. So this is to be used in class with some training from the teachers as well. And they find this quite engaging in the sense that it really makes them think in terms of problem solving, while other tools somehow do not work as well. There's another one which is now, well, this does not start from here. And it's for learning chemistry, and I'll let you see the video first. this game is a VR game, as you see. And the idea is that you grant the ability for people to be able to create molecules. So pick up atoms and join them together to create organic compost. And this was targeted at the time for high school kids, and we are now working on a version actually with the chemistry department here at Technical to make it available as a tool for the course on organic chemistry here. And through this game, so they will learn the nomenclature of these molecules, but also the structure, because structure then grants different properties to components. And it's again like a virtual lab. You can play with it, make mistakes with no big issues, play around to understand the structure, and go with the different challenges that you have there. So they do now this into a physical wood structures, but it's not as flexible for this kind of interactions that you can actually do huge structures and play better with them. And as you see, this is freehand, so there's lots of research here on freehand interaction as well. This is something still draft, but I wanted to mention. So this is a game about management of energy systems as a national-wide. So this game is being built to be a tool in the MOOC that is being developed in the MOOC course that actually you can take. It's free for now. And the idea is that you're placed in the role of someone that needs to take some decisions about the strategy regarding energy of a country. In this case, it's actually Portugal, because we're using the data from Portugal. And you're going to have some objectives for 2050 on the amount of energy that you can have, that you can spend, and in particular, the CO2 emissions that you have, but also having into account the growth, the economical growth, and the happiness, let's say, the consume of the country, because you cannot just transform all energy into solar, because you're going to see problems there. So you can struggle the economy if you do that. So you have to understand what is the sustainable procedure to make it happen in 30 years. And this is exactly the things they are studying in the course. So they can test the scenarios in the game. And of course, they will fail, and they will learn why they failed, and they do it again until they understand the concepts they are trying to, so the concepts of what is a good management of a system as complex as this. This is still draft, so next year I should have a nice video about this. Just a brief mention, so I also do some games for science. I have two here mentioned. One is MD for a Day, was a game that was built for a Santa Maria Hospital and EMM Institute. So they wanted a game for doctors, MDs, to be curious about what happened in the case, in terms of microbiology of cancer patients. And the idea is that there's a lot of things going on in practice that the researchers do not know necessarily, and they should know because they should talk more to have more data, to understand more cases. And the game was just more about that. So you play as a doctor and you have a patient that has cancer, you need to tell them to do certain exams, and then you play a bit of the exam itself to see, for example, and you can see markers in lumps, and you play it a bit to understand how does that work and what is the procedure, the organism procedure of the cancer. And if you find things that are interesting, you just talk to the researchers. So it was a game more for people to put people together. The Volcano Island was a multiplayer game that we built to study impact of common social identity on collaborative attitudes. So you would play a game where you are in a desert island, there's a volcano, and you have to rush to build a boat to get out. The thing is that you have lots of gold, for example, and the guy that actually wins the game is the one with most gold. So you have a mixed motive here. So your motive is actually to get as much gold as possible to win the game. But then if you stay on the island, everything blows up and you lose the game. So you have to manage this conflict. So you have to collaborate a bit with the others to still be able to win. And we study the effects of, for example, putting everybody with the same shirt color. And we see that these kind of things, these very simple cues for shared identity, actually make people collaborate more. We'll actually mention another one. It's not there, but currently working one on norm violation. So it'll be a game where we're going to put people to watch norm violations and things like honesty or fairness and see how people react to it. And actually, games frame the experience more engaging than actually some lab session. The other things that I do a lot is artificial intelligence for games. And I think I'm still going to show this a bit. So this is an example of an AI player for the Don't Starve Together game. And we connected one of our tools to this game to allow people to have some AR roles to try to solve it. So this was the work of a master student, and we have now the tool available. The tool is being used in the AI game course as well. And well, if you want to work on this, just let me know as well. So this is what the tool looks like. So you can load characteristics of the character, see the knowledge it stores, and create rules for behavior and so on. So actually, I'm going to skip this. So this is one of my favorite projects. This is a game that was built actually in one of the courses of the specialization in games on the old version of it. And this is a two-player game. As you can see, you have two different characters with different skills, and they have to pick up all the items in this simple 2D world. And what I do here is try to solve it from an AI perspective. Can AI collaborate to solve this? And this is actually quite challenging because it's a very dynamic world with realistic physics, and they have to coordinate at the planning phase. They need to discuss what they should do. Then they have to execute the actions as well. And usually in games, actions are a bit more discrete than this. So, with these two, actually have a broad set of research that I do here. So we develop AI to play games, is one of the tracks of research, but also to procedurally generate levels. In the case of this two-player game, the Geometry Friends game, I also have work to try to come up with levels that are good for collaboration. So how do we measure good collaboration? How do we generate a level that actually is good at it as well? And it's fun, balanced. And so there's a quite open research question, and I'm addressing that. And in general, I have that as collaborative AI. It's something that interests me a lot. So create agents, AI that is able to play with themselves, so play a team game, but actually more important for me is playing with a human. Can I have a player in this game or in another game that can play with a person and actually have a fun experience for the person? In another thing, so I have had some work on a tool for creating emotional and social behavior for characters in games. You can check it. And this is being used by game companies through a project to build good AI for their games. In this case, I might skip it a bit. So this was
Hi.
a Dutch.
Ik heb problemen met de krachtcel.
This is in Dutch, so I'm not going to understand much. But the idea of the game is that you would play as a customer service, and you want to understand how to deal with the emotions of someone that is complaining about an issue of a product that he has. In this case, it's space parts. So it's a space game, and you're part of a company that sells parts for this, and they're actually complaining. So you just need to check that you have the right approach to manage the mood of the customer. They also did this in another interesting game, and this game was about teamwork, building teams, and you needed to select the best team and actually make sure that you make them play together in the right positions and that you manage the interpersonal relationships with that. And that engine supports the creation of this social AI. This one was from a PhD student where we had AI with the capabilities of use and understand social power. So the idea is that you could tell some of these agents that are playing as actors in a play to choose things they don't want. So all these actors wanted to be the hero or the villain on a play, but you can only assign the villain and the hero to one of them. So you needed to talk to them and engage into a conversation using some strategy, using social power to make sure they accept something that they don't want. And I'm still doing some research on this. This is something new. This is something new, and Diogo is working on that. We are exploring social constructs for cognitive AI that supports as well creating believability and social skills for AI to, for example, be able to generate automatically societies for games or background characters for games, or even main characters for games, but that they understand the social context. So I'm not going to show the video. So the idea on this research track is that I also work on trying to improve characters in games, so NPCs in general. So how can AI be used for that? And can we give them better social skills for social intelligence? So can they understand the user? Can they understand emotional behavior or show emotional behavior? Be able to have interpersonal relationships? And in particular, in the case of the latest project, can they actually understand context and be aware and sensitive to context and change? For example, if they are in class, they should behave in a different way if they are partying at home or in the library. So understand what is the context they are playing on and change that. And in complex games like role-playing games, they're actually quite important. I also want to mention something that is starting now. It's a research project funded by the EU. It's a big project on automated testing or highly interactive applications. I'm in particular working a bit on automated user experience, which in terms of games mean automatic play testing. And am I going to test this game, Space Engineers from Good AI? It's actually a game that is in the market. You can find it on Steam. And it's a collaborative multi-user game where you build together structures on a space station. And they want to add new structures and see if the game does not break. And to test this, currently, they need to put a lot of people testing everything, all combinations. And we're trying to put AI with the social skills so they can actually mimic what people would like to do and try to do and see if the system still works. And as a final note, I just want to show a few things on research on robots in games as well. So for example, here we have a robot that can play the Sueca card game. And it's a 4-player game, so they can play against or with human players. And in this research, we try to see if they show group emotions, if the experience is better. So again, increasing the social and believable behavior to improve the interaction experience. And I leave you with this. And this was a game that was built to play Risk.
I'm going to win. Let's play.
So,
Come on, Johanna. I'm rooting for you.
Heb ik nou eens.
And now a player that I don't like is taking an hour to play. Samuel, you sausage head. This is too much. You are too lucky.
Aspetta,
are really, really lucky.
É, mas não pronuncias sobre isto. Ah, porque ele pode me ver.
Mas isto sou eu.
Pois. O que é que ele está a fazer? Ah, tu és tu, tá?
I like you, but I need to attack.
Pois, já.
Okay, so in this project we need to deal with the embodiment and because it's a game that is played around a table. They probably should look at the other players, at what's happening in the board. Also show some emotion behavior as well, some preferences of the players, and we play this to make it a good experience. Because usually in these kind of games, humans just team up together to kill the bot and then play together. And we try to make this not happen. If the AI is interested in actually a good social role as a teammate in the game, then the experience is better and the robot is accepted as an AI player. Okay, and just to finalize, we are a big team. So I'll just give you a few names here. So there's other professors involved in the specialization in games and the history of more than 10 years of games in Portugal, in Technical. Also some people from other faculties. Some people are not with us, they move for another university. And there's lots of students, there are the names that some of the guys are here that run the activities of the Games Lab and the Game Dev Club. Okay, thank you. Send me an email if you're interested in this. Just check these links for the activities, and you're welcome to show in the lab. Thank you.
So, does anyone have questions?
Hey Rui, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you what games developed here on Technico or from Technico graduates are available on Steam so I can maybe support the local development of video games.
So on Steam, not yet.
Okay.
So we do enforce people to, encourage people to try to go with their project a bit further, but they are still developing the scope of a teaching activity. You can find some on the net, so they are self-published, so you can try to play them. But as far as I know, we don't have one on Steam.
Okay, fine, it's okay.
Does anyone have any more questions for Rui? Okay.
Hello. I'd like to ask, maybe you don't know this, but how does the gaming landscape for game developers look in Portugal? Like, is there a market for it? I mean, I assume there is, but like, is it substantial, or is it more something that students eventually migrate elsewhere?
We have both. So it's growing, and so in the past or 2 years ago, the industry actually organized themselves and tried to present it in a strong position. But I have to admit that we have, 3, 4 big sustainable companies, and we have a lot they are trying to strive new games, and they publish 1, 2 games, and they need to restructure themselves. But the tissue of game developers is actually growing, so there's lots of people that are trying. So I'm quite enthusiastic about that. But the industry is still quite young. So we've been around doing games, but I think in the particular 2, 3 past years, we have been able to put games on Steam, on PS4, so it's starting to grow a lot. So I do have some contacts of some of the companies if you want. And actually the mission here that we have is to prepare people and to motivate them to work. Of course, we also encourage people to go out, learn, and then come back. And it's starting to happen now, and I think it's actually an important part of this process. So we have people were abroad more than 10 years and now coming back and bring the experience. We also have people coming from the US that now comes to Lisbon. And I think this is quite an important phase of the industry. I expect some improvement in the next few years.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I know you have a question. We'll have to move that to the showcase. Let's just thank our speaker again and pick the winner for the session.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. So we're going now to proceed to pick the winner with the prize associated to Rui's keynote, which is 50 euros on PlayStation Store. So Pedro Soares. Congrats. Thank you so much for coming to Rui's keynote. Please now head to the auditorium exit. The next keynote by Garrett Fredley will start in just a bit. So see you in a bit.
O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas.
Are you ready? Let's go.
A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia. O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude. O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas.
Are you ready? Let's go.
A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia. O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro. O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas.
Are you ready? Let's go.
A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia. O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on stage, Garrett Fredley.
Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a nice day in this sunny day in Lisbon. I've been telling everybody I met since I've gotten here that it's like 4 degrees on average in Vancouver, Canada, and I came here with like a jacket on and a sweater and a long sleeve and pants. And I was not ready for this weather at all, to say the least. And so, actually, wait, I think we did get to 7 degrees, like the other day. So we're getting there. We're getting there. So I'm here to talk to you today about AAA games. Something that I love, something I've played since I was a kid. I'm sure many of you here today, since you're at a games talk, also like video games. Now, video games are interesting because a lot of the time we focus on the today of video games. We focus on the now. We focus on what games are able to do next year or even the year after. But we don't often focus on what happened before, the legacy of game companies. And so I want to talk about this concept of a technological legacy. A technological legacy is a culmination of all the choices to add, remove, or change technology over the course of a company's existence. And by understanding this legacy and understanding all these choices that led up to now, we can better understand the costs associated with producing a title of the size, let's say, of FIFA. But before I really get into a legacy, I'm sure you probably want to know why I'm even here talking about this subject. So my name is Garrett Fredley. I'm a programmer and build engineer at a company in Vancouver, Canada called Phoenix Labs. But I wasn't always there. A long time ago, I went to school to study video game design. In fact, I don't really come from a computer science degree program. I don't come from a comp sci background. When I left college, I had experienced 3D modeling. I was an artist for a small period of time in high school. I studied a lot of code in school. And when I left, I was like, I really want to study or pursue like this kind of merging of art and programming. And that's what led me to my very first career working at Electronic Arts. And I started during the period of the end of FIFA 17. And I did that for about a year. I was responsible for the tools and pipelines relating to get content from Frostbite, the brand new engine, which I'll be talking much about later, and the older technology for the Gen 3 platforms, Xbox 360 and PS3. And I did a lot of the conversion technology for that stuff. And I'll be getting to that in a little bit as well. Ultimately, though, my last position I held at Electronic Arts was what's known as a preservation software engineer. I highly doubt anyone in this room has ever heard of that title because I was arguably the only one in EA who had that title. It's kind of a weird idea. I was the archiver. I was responsible for making sure that when a FIFA title was built, or any title in EA was built, the pieces, components, tools, technologies, pipelines, documentation, so on and so forth, was put away amongst a various group of virtual machines, if you're familiar with the virtual machine technology, and so that these virtual machines could reproduce the game in its entirety from scratch. And I did that for a couple of years. I was responsible for making sure that FIFA would be preserved. I was the historian of FIFA, if you will. But ultimately, my time at Electronic Arts came to an end. And I moved on to pursue independent development at various companies, kind of a much smaller series of developments, and I stayed in the DevOps or build automation space. And this ultimately led me down a route of understanding how technology differs when you look at AAA versus indie. Because in AAA, I'm sure many of you who played FIFA know that these games are pretty big. In fact, I want to know, who here has played FIFA at some point in their lives? Okay. If I ask that question at like a conference in Canada, it's like maybe 2-3 people hold their hand up, so make me very proud. So I want to talk about this idea of a technological legacy. And when we look at a company like Electronic Arts, they've been around for about 38 years. That company was founded in 1982. And when we think about Electronic Arts, we think of what can they do today? What can they do to make FIFA even better? But we don't know that 30 years ago, they had technology far, far different than we have today. The reason being is that if you look at game technology over the course of even the last 30 years, since the 90s, games are not that old. But even to that point, technology has changed drastically in those 30 years. Back in the 90s, we never had the concept of a game engine. All we had was like assembly and maybe a 2D graphics program. Everything else was built internally. What this meant was, especially for a company like Electronic Arts, who were founded in '82, everything was proprietary, everything was internal, everything had to be built in-house. There was no external shared technologies. And at first glance, this seems kind of like the average. I'm sure most people who start a studio will probably be writing their own stuff. The problem isn't that they did that, the problem is that they did that for 38 years. Because let's say when Electronic Arts started, we have a coding language, we have an art tool. Simple as that, that's all we got. I'm sure everyone in here is very excited at the prospect of living in the assembly world. Not that great. Over time, the things that you don't have today, you'll have to build. So you'll start with, let's say, a physics engine, you might have a renderer, and on the art side, you might have written an image processor or some sort of shaders that make your game look really cool. So that's pretty awesome. You have a first layer of proprietary technology. The issue is that right now you have a small layer. It's manageable. You probably have 2 programmers who've written all this stuff and they have all that knowledge in-house. Now do that for 38 more years. This will start getting worse. You'll have even more branches of proprietary technology, external technology as it becomes available. And now you're getting to this weird network of relationships between the things you've built and the things that you didn't build. And do you think that for 38 years you can keep all the information and all the developers who built this stuff in-house? Probably not. You're going to end up with some things that no one knows how to operate anymore. And the problem extends even further because this is what you start with. But as companies grow, you introduce new domains of technology, let's say pipeline tools. Now you have, let's say, 30 developers, and now you need to deliver things around the office, from myself to you and you to me. This has the same problem, proprietary versus external. But as companies grow even further, the space that I'm particularly passionate about is automation. Automation is now the rapid en masse production of content, builds, things like that. And to just give you an idea, just give you a rough number of the sort of level of automation technologies required to operate FIFA, a number that I've learned about over the last couple of years was EA produces 16 terabytes of builds a day, on average, over the course, I think about like 14 to 16 was the average for like 2 years ago. That was 2 years ago. Imagine it today. Imagine the level of technology required to do that. And then that's 38 years of that technology built up on itself. And when you look at both Electronic Arts, the stories that I'm going to share today, and all the other companies you've seen at this conference, I want you to think about the sort of legacy they're dealing with. Because any company who has lasted longer than 2 weeks, or even if it's been within 2 weeks, probably has a legacy they're dealing with. And with that in mind, I want to talk about understanding the risk that companies take on as they grow. Because just growing a company and being a company like Electronic Arts doesn't just come risk-free. Every choice you make to create technology, to take on technology, comes with a burden that you accept. Now, I want to talk about a title, and I'm curious to see how many people in this room have played it. Who here has played FIFA 17? All right. So FIFA 17 was the year of Frostbite. And this was a big year because this is a giant step up for the visual prowess of the franchise. We went from an old Ignite engine, the Ignite engine being the other proprietary engine we've written. We kind of like proprietary stuff. EA has a lot of it. And so Ignite was great. We did it. We jumped from Ignite to Frostbite. But I want you to remember something, and I'm curious to see how many people in this room know this. So we did upgrade to Frostbite for 3 of the platforms. So what we know as the Gen 4 platforms, the Xbox One, PS4, and PC, those platforms got the Frostbite. However, we never stopped supporting Ignite, meaning the Gen 3 platforms, Xbox 360 and PS3, are still being produced with Ignite. Now, at first glance, this seems trivial. Okay, sure. But who here is familiar with the concept of a game engine? Oh, that makes me so happy. So, for those who aren't familiar with the concept of game engine, the game engine is a central piece of technology that drives the production of a video game. It's technically all the aspects, the physics engine, the rendering engine, all the tools and assisted pipelines that come together to form a suite that you can use to build a video game. And when you think about the idea that a project is built off of a game engine, it is the core of that product. You associate FIFA now with Frostbite because it's such a big piece of that franchise now. Imagine supporting 2 of them. There is so much proprietary stuff you have to deal with when you're supporting 2 engines that leads to a lot of complications down the road. But this upgrade wasn't something we did overnight. As you can expect, especially switching engines and working on a multi-million-dollar franchise like FIFA, this was a very, very long process we had to undergo to get this done. And just to give some rough numbers, this took a lot of people. This took a huge amount of people. I'm not sure if you're aware, FIFA has hundreds and hundreds, I want to almost say over 1,000 different developers on that title. It's one of EA's, actually, it is EA's most largest and most expensive franchise. And when we were shifting to FIFA or to Frostbite, one of the realities we accepted was, I worked at the time during the artworks department, which is the central art team for the company, and I was working there as a technical artist. And I remember that the office space we had probably 100 artists in that giant warehouse-like room. We shared that space with a UFC art team. So the UFC title. We actually kicked them out of the office to another building to hire more artists for FIFA. What FIFA wants, FIFA gets. And so this was kind of a weird reality. So we hired, I want to say 40 new artists just to create the content for FIFA 17. If anyone's familiar with that title, you know that story mode came out for the newer consoles. That took you don't even want to know how much effort that took to produce not only the content, but the tools to actually build that content. And we also kind of extend this. We did an engine upgrade. And the engine upgrade meant that we had a technology shift. And so I think we hired, I want to say 20 plus engineers just to throw bodies at the problem. It wasn't something we could just do easily, it was something that we had to do with manpower. And obviously, as you can imagine, making sure that this was going to be stable and be a great shift that wasn't going to undergo any issues, this took years. This wasn't something we considered on a Friday and was like, yeah, you know what would be kind of cool? Let's just shift our entire engine over. That's not really how that went. And so what we did is we had years of prep time, years where we're let's make sure everything's been prototyped. We have an existing copy of FIFA in Frostbite. Let's make sure it works. And that's when we were able to go, okay, now let's go spend a year to actually do it. And that, on top of the fact of all the content we made for FIFA 17, was how long and how much it costed to actually get to a new engine. And overall, this is fine. We did it, but there was always a cost associated to upgrades. My first golden rule that I've learned from FIFA, since the Frostbite upgrade, no upgrade is without cost. There is no perfect upgrade. An upgrade completely, unless you're going from 0 to 1, there is no upgrade without cost. And what I mean by that is this photo. For anyone who here has played FIFA 17, I know I'm going to shrink this list down even further, who's played FIFA 17 on the Gen 3 consoles, Xbox 360 or PS3. Perfect. This photo might seem similar to you. In FIFA, especially for the Frostbite shift, and the fact that we had to carry 2 engines, the content we would produce for FIFA Frostbite was not capable of being ran on FIFA Ignite, simply because the console and the hardware couldn't support it. It wasn't really a choice on our part, we had to do it. We're talking about massively scaled up files for Frostbite that we had to somehow, through the magic of technology, get to be operable on the older consoles. And so, at first glance, we'll just throw more artists at the problem. Let's just hire more artists. But in theory, if we're going to be supporting FIFA on 2 different engines for a very long time, this strategy won't work. just manpower won't work. And something you're going to hear from AAA games, something that any AAA title is produced upon, is the concept of automation. As a build engineer, I love automation. If I could automate coffee being poured for me and delivered to me in bed, I would. Coffee and automation are my life. And so when you look at a concept like this, we need to somehow take 1,800 plus players, dozens of stadiums, unbelievable amounts of world content, down-res them and get them into a console that doesn't even support them. That is not something we can solve through manpower. We have to solve through automation. And so the team that I worked on during FIFA 17 was born. It is known as the downstream team. The downstream team, the sole purpose of it is to take all the tools and technologies, the assets, and all the fancy things of the Frostbite work and downport it to the older engine, the tools that we built for Ignite. So what we did is we spent the year and beyond developing a bunch of conversion tools. And so when you look at these two pictures, oftentimes what would happen is that we wrote a massive suite of tools that would retopologize models, meaning down-res the vertice count. We would have texture conversion, we would have shader conversion, a lot of different weird checks that would just manipulate pretty much anything about the game we could convert to a lower form. We wrote an entire universe of pipeline to make this automated. Just by itself, that's an expensive thing to do. But it's not nearly as expensive as what it would take going manually. And so I want to take a second for us to kind of realize what this means. We talk a lot about upgrades being wonderful, being great. We should always keep pushing for the future. The problem is that, as I said earlier, no upgrade is without cost. The cost that FIFA brought on us was the fact that this thing even has to be a thing. So learn from our mistakes. Frostbite was great, but there's implications that we sometimes don't really want to have to deal with. And I have seen Lionel Messi's face on my screen way too many times to count. Please learn from us. But FIFA 17 wasn't the only title I got a chance to work on, and it wasn't the only title that I learned a lot from. FIFA 18. Who here has played FIFA 18? Awesome. So FIFA 18, for me, was the year of Switch. It was the first time in a while at least, that we shifted to a new platform, the Switch. And for the most part, the Switch was actually one of the best platforms I ever got a chance to work on FIFA. The problem with the Switch inevitably came with the fact that anyone who knows about what kind of hardware drives the Switch, it's about as bad as the Gen 3 consoles. The Switch has horrible hardware. And so naturally, the Frostbite did not work on that console. So not only did we got this brand new, awesome, fresh start that was Switch, we ended up going backwards to the older engine. We doubled down on an old engine that we wrote 15 years ago. It's kind of a weird idea, but we got the positive in that we now have new tools to build. It is a weird situation, but this was a chance at allowing us to rewrite some of our wrongs. You see, when you're working at a AAA company and you're talking about a legacy, how we build a game largely stays the same over the course of a long period of time, let's say a decade. The methodology behind how FIFA gets built stayed the same over the years. When we're talking about Switch, it's like we know how to deploy games to consoles, we know how to make them to a disk, we know how to get them to users. That's not going to change. The technologies and tools, the unique pieces that went into getting a Switch build created could now be written from scratch. We had no more prior history we had to think about. This is the first time in a long time that we can think about not having to deal with a legacy. And what nice, at the time, this was when I was working as a preservation engineer working on preserving FIFA, this was the easiest thing to preserve. I was living the dream. And this was awesome. I was so happy. First time in my life I was happy. So this was great. It was easy to preserve. The reason being was that when you're talking about technology being written, one of the core things you always want to keep in mind is keep the knowledge of how it was built alive. At the time, because it was so fresh, there's documentation, there were comments in the code, the workflow documents were still alive, and the people who did it were still around. And so it was just by virtue of everything being there, it was amazing. But there's kind of a consequence with growth. A consequence that every time we focus heavily on transforming our workflows to follow the new. If we want to shift to cloud, for instance, go live in the land of Docker, for instance, we're going to have a consequence that is going to be universally applied. And for us, that was the fact that all of our older tools started breaking down. Because we were so focused on Frostbite, we were focused on the new engine, new tools, Switch, that we honestly started taking the people off of the older tools and putting them onto the new, that these older tools now no longer had caretakers. And there's a problem that comes with this, and I'm very curious to see who has heard of Band-Aid fixes. Not enough of you have heard this. Band-Aid fixes, my friends, is one of my least favorite parts about technology. I want to explain what Band-Aid fixes are. Band-Aid fixes, using an analogy that was told to me a long time ago, last year, actually, during a conference, somebody used this analogy to describe the concept of Band-Aid fixes. Band-Aid fixes are like a series of pipes you'd find in your house. Just like a pipeline you use at a company or I'm sure many of you have worked with pipelines. Eventually, whether it be through a shift in code, somebody deleted something by accident, whatever it may be, a part of your pipeline breaks. For any engineer who has experience in the field, has probably seen this happen in their work. It's natural, it's normal. And so what we do typically is we say, I have the solution, I found it, I'm going to fix it with a Band-Aid. You're not going to really spend a whole lot of time really analyzing the situation, understanding why it even came to be in the first place. And so you're going to go on with your life, thinking that you're the savior of your pipeline. This doesn't really work. And those who have seen this problem before will know why it doesn't work. And it's exactly what I said earlier. You don't really know the full situation. Because inevitably, this will happen again, and again, and it'll keep happening no matter how hard you try to fix it, because a Band-Aid fix is not a solution. The problem with Band-Aid fixes is that you don't understand why it popped up. You just understand that it needs a fix. And so what we end up doing is that we want a solution. If you look at the plumbing under your house, and you look under your sink, would you be excited to see that your sink has a bunch of duct tape on it? Probably not. This is what I mean. You'd probably be like, is this pipe safe to be using? Maybe we should actually replace the pipe. Maybe we should look at the material of the pipe, understand the cause of the problems. And what we ended up doing is we kept just solving the problems as they came up. We used Band-Aid fixes probably more than anybody. I must admit that I've done this too many times to count. I'm not proud of it, but I'm here to tell you that you shouldn't do it. And what we did is we doubled down on this problem. And I hope some of you maybe have seen this, and I hope some of you have learned from this. What we did was we started to assign people to these problems. Oh, I was in there too. We started to assign people to these problems. I would one day go fix a part, I would clean it up, and walk away. My peer would also go, sit down, clean it, fix it, walk away. Neither of us really knowing what we did. We'd say in a meeting I fixed the thing, cool, man, and walk away. We never understood any of our solutions that came to this. So what do you think is going to happen? It's going to be doomed to repeat itself. Because that's what Band-Aid fixes are. And when you look at your own work, and when you look at your own pipelines, something that we ended up learning was that you need somebody to stick around. You need somebody to hold on to the context of the problem. When you fix something, when you solve an issue, you take on a piece of context. You know what you did. You know that there was a previous issue that was resolved by something you did. Stick around for a while. And you see this a lot in AAA games. You have people who are cycled out really frequently on short contracts. By cycling people out really frequently, you have this natural problem where the next person's not going to have the context. And then this is going to happen forever. And let's dial back to this idea of legacy. Do you want your legacy to be full of this? Do you as engineers who take pride on the code you write, for it to be looking like a big Band-Aid pipe, a pipe covered in duct tape? You probably don't. Because engineers aren't proud of that kind of stuff. We're proud of stable solutions. We're proud of extensive solutions and proper solutions. What's funny is that there's a fun joke that I like to go with a coworker of mine based on a script that he got to work with. I think it's his brother he got to work with. The code is arbitrary, so I don't have to read it, but there was a script that we had in the artworks department. There was just one script, and it was a joke amongst us. The person who wrote it was an old coworker of mine, and he wrote it as a hack. Now, there's many days where I have written code that I'm not proud of. In fact, who here has written code they're not proud of? Okay, for those of you who didn't raise your hand, I don't believe you. Everyone has written hacky code. Code they're not proud of, code that definitely shouldn't be seen. It happens, it's natural. So what he did here was he knew that. He knew, he's like, no one should see this. I shouldn't even see it. So he wrote as a comment, please deprecate by 2017. He actually wrote in production code used in FIFA, please don't use this. And so you think, FIFA, man, they know what they're doing. No, they didn't. So surely by now, 2 years, come on. Still, no, not really. This is going to keep going. This is the problem, is no matter whether you can identify with the things that you've done wrong, whether you know personally that you've done it wrong, if you're getting cycled out later, you'll never have time to fix it. Because the legacy will exist whether you're gone or not. So be careful about your legacy, because just because you're going doesn't mean the problems that you've left for others is going with you. This has been an interesting time for me, because this was kind of the jokes that I left Electronic Arts with. But I left a lot of things. I left with a lot of interesting lessons from Electronic Arts. One of them being that I don't trust code anymore. So frankly, maybe this will end up being a reality, and I really hope that it isn't a reality. Maybe it will be a reality. Maybe it'll be like 2060 before it's actually fixed. I don't know. Let's talk about some lessons I learned. Let's talk about lessons we should all learn from our code, and learn from each other, learn from our industries. The first one the big thing that I learned, this is really why I'm in the career that I am. Automation is required for growth. I recommend anyone in this room, and those of you who are in it right now, or those of you who are considering, or maybe you're just early in your careers and you're not really sure what to do yet, invest in automation. It is a minimum requirement to scale the way Electronic Arts does. Any AAA company you look at, if you look at conferences around the world, this is usually a theme. Somewhere in the mix, somebody says, I wrote a script to do X and Y really quickly. That's kind of a given. I recommend it. There are a lot of technologies in the world that are free, that allow you to automate your work. Start doing it today. The biggest benefit of being an engineer is we can be really lazy, because we can just make tools that do our jobs for us. To a point, don't do everything on automation, but you get the gist. Invest in automation the way AAA does. It's a given. Temporary employees leave the temporary solutions. Now, many of you are actually, you're all students, and so right now you're not technically in a company like Electronic Arts quite yet, but you're in teams. You're working with your peers, you're working with your friends, and you're working with your future coworkers. In your teams, you probably do group projects, and you're writing code for each other. Respect that by having each other around, the code you write is made more powerful because that knowledge is kept within your group. Don't just write things and expect it to last forever. The longer you keep people around, the longer you keep information living and being alive, the longer it can have an impact, and the better it can grow and scale. Upgrades can have consequences. As I alluded to earlier, not every upgrade is one that should be undergone. Many of the upgrades that I consider today, working in the automation space, there's implications far beyond the cost of doing it in the first place. Many of the cases when we talked about Frostbite, it's easy to focus on the good, focus on the positive, focus on the exciting visuals that go along with it. But as engineers, we can't let cost just be a thing we can accept easily. We have to understand that there is problems. And the last thing you want to be doing is when you have an upgrade and you're having a champagne party and you're all really excited, for your boss to walk in and say, yeah, you guys are going to have to go back to work, you broke everything. I don't say that from experience. So please, consider your upgrades. And old technology isn't dead technology. When I was going through electronic arts and I was working on the conversion pipeline, I was working as a preservation engineer, like a lot of that time was spent like, why are we working with Ignite? Why are we working? In many cases, I was working on tools that were older than I am. That's a very surreal experience. I saw scripts, whole entire pipelines from the early 2000s, late 90s. And you must ask yourself, why do we still use it? Surely there should be a replacement. And you're probably right. There probably is something that's new. But why should we upgrade? Why should we upgrade to something when we already have a totally viable working solution? Just because something is new doesn't make it valuable. Just because something is new and does the same thing something yours does doesn't make it an obvious choice. If you already have a working solution, don't take on the expense to upgrade. Enjoy old technology. I'm sure some of you were taught classes in assembly. Still valuable to some degree. And so, a lot of the time when we talk about things like this, these lessons learned, I can just talk a lot about what things I've learned about electronic arts and things I learned about FIFA and things I learned about other games. But I want to learn with you. I want to teach you the same way I was taught by my peers. Let's talk about how we can improve our legacy. And many of you have heard the lessons in here. I'm just going to repeat them because it's the same everywhere you go. And my favorite topic to teach these days, as an educator, as a peer, I love teaching this topic. Keeping your code clean. Oh yes, I'm repeating your instructors here. I want us all to be honest to each other. We're all friends in this room. We're all friends in the tent. Who puts comments in their code? Come on, don't say there's people who have their hands down. All right. I'm glad that most of you said yes, though. And what's funny is that all of us have probably written scripts that don't have comments. I surely have. I'm not proud of it. I would still wake up in the middle of the night having nightmares about that day. But the reality of comments, something as simple as comments, you're still in the minority when you do that. And that's the weird part, is you think when you look at like games or look at technology, us as professionals and us who work at these companies, we would always comment. We'd always be on top of the game. We'd always want to make sure our code is going to last. As a preservation engineer, as a person who saw the history of EA, I can absolutely tell you that is not the case. We have flaws. The developers at companies have flaws. Every title you've ever worked with is built on these flaws. But the problem with not having code in your scripts is that your legacy becomes hard to work with. When we talk about code, one of the things that I've heard many times, and I'm sure some of you have done this, is you're like, wow, this code's amazing. It's like the best thing I've ever written. Guys, hear me out, I'm the best. But frankly, everyone in the room is going to like roll their eyes and say like, none of us can even read what this does. That's pretty normal. Even working at Electronic Arts, we did this all the time. The lesson that I ended up learning from this over the years is that when you take code and you spend some time to make it readable, changing class names to something that's legible, changing function names to something that can be easily understood, spending time just to make sure the others can understand your work, goes into the heart of the problem, which is you don't write code for yourself. You don't not write code so that you can be amazing. You write it so that your company can be amazing. In group projects, if you've sat there wondering, wow, I hope this code has to be great because I need to be proud of it, you're already thinking the wrong way. And you're in a group project, when you're in a company, when you're in an industry, you're writing so that your peers can succeed. You're writing so that your business can succeed. It seems like an old lesson, but it's something that you still see today. Because people want to be proud of their work. When we come together, that's when our work actually matters. And I want to share another story with code, because I'm sure I have too many stories to share. There was a script. When I was working as a technical artist, there was a script that I opened up one day, and I swear I wish I never did. All of our tools, many of our most complex conversion tools, complex art tools, called a script. And this script, in the folder directories, was the only file in a certain folder. This is already a warning. When I opened that script up, I found a truly disgusting sight. A long time ago, there was a language that was used. It was very common in the 3D modeling space. There's a software called Maya. And some of you might have heard of this software before. Maya had a proprietary language that was used called MEL. MEL. MEL was a functional programming language, and it's still in large use today by most companies, simply because somebody wrote it so long ago that no one knows how to get rid of it. I'm not kidding, that's an actual problem. And so when I opened the script up, there was like 3,000 lines of functional programming code with no comments and no one could understand. But everything we wrote referenced it. And I remember one day I went to one of my coworkers and I was like, what is this script doing? Because like this seems to be the problem. And they're like, we don't ask that question here. This is the dark side of programming, and I hope that none of you do that. When you look at writing code for the majority, we're writing code so that people like me don't get scared by things like that. That's not the only lesson I learned. You all probably know to keep your code clean. I just hope this story reminds you that it's more important than you think. But there's another lesson I learned, this one a bit more technical. Compartmentalization. The realm of making sure that your tech stack is manageable. Now, in games, in most other technologies, or spaces, there are too many software, too many things. Who here knows every single logo on the screen right now? That should tell you. This is a small snippet of the things I got a chance to work with over the years. And this is like 1/100th of the type of content or the amount of tools that a company like Electronic Arts deals with. When I was working as an archiver, I got a chance to preserve a lot of these tools, and the list goes on forever. And so when you're looking at AAA, there's a certain threshold you cross when it doesn't really matter how many tools you have. Just because you're running a tech stack of 30 tools doesn't really matter anymore, because what matters is that how do you actually manage it all? And the fundamental principle that EA and any AAA company tries to follow is the ability to maintain this. And so compartmentalization is a tool they use to do that. Compartmentalization is the idea that we're just going to have a bunch of boxes, lots and lots of boxes. And what we do with these boxes is we just chuck the software into these boxes. I'm going to say boxes a whole lot. Because when we use the concept of boxes, it doesn't matter what tool's inside the boxes. It can just be a folder on your directory system. That's all it needs to be. We associate the documentation, the user documents that we've written, maybe the official documents by the source or by the companies, and we associate all the tools we've written, all the proprietary stuff we've created, and we just throw into that box with it. And so no longer do we think about, and it's kind of a weird analogy, but it's something that I've heard recently, is this analogy of the pet versus, oh gosh, what was it? Pet versus cattle, I want to say. Pet versus like livestock. Who has heard that analogy before? Because it's a bit of a weird one. The pet versus livestock analogy means when you are very close to a software, it's your best friend. You have a pillow with a logo ingrained on it. When you have a close relationship with a tool, you treat it like a pet. You give it a name. You know it by heart. You can already tell I'm going to be going with this. The problem is that when you have 1,000 tools, you can't just be close and personal with 1,000 tools. It starts to get unwieldy. The cattle mentality, or livestock mentality, whatever the official word is the mentality of like, I don't really care what their names are. They're just tools to me. It's a bit of a kind of a heartless mentality to have, but when you're working at the stature of a AAA, you can't be friendly with these tools anymore. The compartmentalization mentality is simply that. I have a bunch of tools, I don't care what they are, I need them to be as portable and as maintainable as possible. And kind of as an extension to that, one typical method that this gets used by is this world of package management. You might not have ever heard of these tools before, JFrog Artifactory and Chocolatey. I'm not selling you on Chocolate, that's an actual tool name. I recommend using it, it's actually pretty sweet. These tools, oh, nice. I take full credit for that. When we look at tools like this, package management tools, if your methodology is already to like just wrap things up in boxes, then package management inherently goes with that. And it introduces a lot of amazing benefits. I won't get into them today, but I recommend if you're working on building up your scale, try playing with this kind of package management solutions like JFrog Artifactory and Chocolatey. It's just kind of like a nice thing to do. And because when you look at things like boxes, there's a very, very peculiar benefit that I want everyone to consider. In games, like the fact that we have so many tools and so many technologies, it's nearly impossible to identify every single one and to totally understand everything. No one wants to try to do that. What we did at Electronic Arts and what we do in every company that I try to push for is not to understand the software, but to understand the relationships between tools, the dependencies between tools. When you're thinking about evolving a technological legacy, evolving a company, you may cut away tools, you may add tools, you may upgrade tools, or for whatever reason, you may downgrade tools. These can't be done if you just have a crazy amount of dependencies on everything. I'm sure many of you today have written a function that had way too many uses. And someday when you wanted to remove it, everything broke. I've done that too many times. And this happens, it's fine. But when we understand the relationships between things, if we compartmentalize and then just look at the wires, we grow a greater understanding of how we can manipulate our tech stack. If you break things down into boxes and you draw very clear relationships between things, if you just look at the wires, you can now manipulate your tech stack as much as you wish. And at a company like Electronic Arts, where we have hundreds of these, the more we can simplify those relationships, the better we can just keep growing. Imagine if it was a total spaghetti mess. It'd be nearly impossible to make FIFA. But through this is something that we use in really all companies. Now we'll kind of round off with a point of reflection. FIFA has grown a lot over the years. It's grown a lot because we did a lot. Behind the scenes, we often build a lot of crazy technologies, we write a lot of tools, we define a lot of relationships, and many of you will start to do that today as well. Today, tomorrow, maybe you already have. But I want everyone to stop for a moment and reflect that as we work, we are constantly going to be focused on the future. We're constantly going to be focused on what the next step is. Cloud computing, blockchain, Docker, whatever it may be, whatever buzzword of the day it is. We have to remember that we came from somewhere. And if you reflect on the past of EA, what we did yesterday is going to absolutely define what we can do today. And so as you move forward, as we move forward as engineers, keep that in mind. It'll go a long way. That's it. Thank you. Now I believe it's Q&A time, so if you have any questions for me, feel free to ask.
Yeah, it is Q&A time, so... Okay, who has a question? Okay.
Hey. Oh, wow.
Hello.
So first of all, thanks for the talk. It was like really cool.
Thank you.
I was just wondering how was your career progress, because you didn't really mention it, and I'm just curious. Did you just get in EA? You just decided, yeah, I'm going to work in FIFA 17, and that's it? And how about your most recent work? Are you applying also these rules, to the I forgot the name, but
Phoenix Labs.
The Dauntless, yeah, Phoenix Library, yeah.
Yeah,
so
great.
that was my question, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, just kind of reiterate the question so we all hear it. It was like, what is my career path? What was my career path? Did I just start at EA, or did I have a long-term goal with EA? Does that kind of reflect your question?
Yeah, I have a second question, but I'll get to
Perfect. I'm excited. So looking back at my career path, it is a bit confusing. I started in game design theory, which is a kind of a whole separate field than engineering. What led me down the route of FIFA is really opportunity. I didn't know much about FIFA at the time, because I largely played other genres. And so one day I saw, I had experience in modeling, I had experience in high school from doing 3D art, and there was an associate technical artist position at Electronic Arts. The sports studio was in Vancouver, so it was kind of just an easy choice. And I was like, well, they need me to learn Python, I'm gonna go learn Python and apply today. And that ended up being my first career path. So it wasn't like I had a long-term, EA is gonna be my dream, I'm doing it. It was literally there's a good opportunity and I took it. And it's kind of as an addition to this, oftentimes when I look at, especially with my career today, it's easy to be really, really focused on one particular company. Opportunity comes whether you like a company or not. And so it's nice to just be like, that's a good opportunity, I'm gonna go for it. And to kind of answer the last part of your question, the company I work for today is a company called Phoenix Labs. And they work on an online product, and the idea of management, compartmentalization, let's say, it still exists. I still see scripts that don't have comments in them. I still see historical problems where people kind of leave and they leave a tech stack for the wind. It happens everywhere we go, and these lessons I've learned still apply. We still use technology we wrote at the beginning of the company, and I still question why they do that. It exists, it happens. So these lessons I apply everywhere I go. You'll hear me rant about them all the time.
Okay, cool. Posso fazer uma segunda pergunta? Yeah, so my second question is more like, so you worked as a preservation, right? So you preserved everything. So do you think there's like also value in preserving the game? So if there's like a FIFA 1, 2, 3, oh, actually it's numbers now. Well, okay. Yep. Yeah, so is there like, what's the value in maintaining like a playable version of these games in the, for instance, in EA Office? Is this valuable? Do you consider it to be valuable, like older versions of the game or older builds? I don't know.
Yeah, no, awesome question. It was, do you find value in preserving old games? And absolutely, I'm really glad you asked that. So when we talk about preservation, we actually preserve it in a playable state. A long time ago, we worked on this tier model of what makes a good archive, what makes a good preserved game. Tier 1 was like, just take everything it was used and throw into a box somewhere. And that is not really valuable. Like, it's cool for reference, but when we talk about a playable game, like being able to play FIFA 5, let's say, that's kind of a weird, cool thing in itself. When we look at technology today, we see like the PlayStation 1 just got a remastered console, and you can play old PlayStation 1 games. Imagine being able to not only play a game like that, but also get additional content that is suddenly like available for that game. It's those kind of interesting considerations, which is why we do the preservation. I can't obviously say what we preserved, but definitely there is value. And if anything, we can reference it for new things in the future. Sorry? We'll get there. I heard FIFA.
Hello, yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
So there could be like potential like João Felix or Cristiano Ronaldo in FIFA 1 for the first FIFA that came out. So would that be a possibility?
Well, I can't say whether we preserve FIFA 1 or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But technically, we could do things with anything we preserved.
Cool. That's it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So due to time constraints, we're going to move Garrett to the...
I'll be in the corner over there.
Yeah, he'll be in the corner. I forgot the name, I'm sorry. So if anyone wants to make extra questions, he'll be on the corner because I forgot the name, sorry. So we're going now to give away the prize associated with Garrett's keynote, but first, a big round of applause for Garrett's awesome keynote.
Also, as a last addition before I let you climb the stage, if you want to, went away. If you want to connect with me and chat with me on LinkedIn, feel free. I had my link up here. Perfect, thank you. If you want, you can follow me on Twitter or chat with me on LinkedIn. I'm always cool with either. So feel free. Take a photo. I can chat with you outside. So, yeah.
One big final round of applause for Garrett for this. Okay, so we're now going to give away the prize, which is this very nice keyboard and mouse bundle. So let's see who's going to win. It's going to come here on stage to take a photo. Take a photo. Pick a winner. Ricardo Andrade. Okay, big round of applause for him. Okay, so everyone can should leave the auditorium now as we prepare the next keynote, Jamie Fristrom. Who wants to ask questions to to Garrett? He'll be in our showcase area.
Se partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude. O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas. A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia. O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude. O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas. A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia. O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude. O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas. A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia. O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude. O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas. A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia. O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude. O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas. A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia. O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on stage, Jamie Fristrom.
Boa tarde. A friend of mine told me to say that on Twitter. I don't know what it means. Could have been fooling, messing with me, I don't know. Thank you for coming and seeing my talk. It's great to be invited to come speak out here. Brought my girls, made a little vacation of the trip. We've had a great time here in Lisbon. And this is a game I worked on. This is why I sometimes get invited to go speak in exotic cities. It's my 15 minutes of fame. About 15 years ago now, I was the technical director on the Spider-Man games that went along with the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi movies. And I had the opportunity to put a fairly large thumbprint of my own, have a fairly large influence on how the second game in particular turned out. The story was, when I joined the Spider-Man 1 team, I wasn't very happy with how the web-swinging gameplay worked. It was kind of like flying. You're just sort of like lazily bobbing through the air. The webs were sort of decorations, cosmetic. They just attached to the clouds or something, not clear. And so I wasn't satisfied. I wanted something that felt visceral. I wanted something where there was a game there, where there was a challenge. And I wanted something that felt realistic. It's hard to talk about realism when you're talking about superhero characters and the impossible things they do, but I imagined that if Spider-Man were real, his webs would not attach to clouds in the sky. So I spent late nights for a few weeks prototyping something different. I was too busy during the day with my technical director duties to work on my idea, but during the night I was able to prototype some stuff with some stock assets, and I put something together, and after a few weeks I was like, I think I had something ready to show the rest of the team. So I brought the rest of the audience in there, or rest of my coworkers into my office. I was like, check this out. And they mostly thought it sucked, to be honest. Yeah, I'd only worked on it for a few weeks, and there were these issues with it where, like, you'd touch a wall while you were swinging and you'd stick, and that would kill your momentum. It would be no fun. It was hard to control. It was pretty bad. So we talked about it, and we're like, you know what? It would be a disaster to try to implement, like, this fundamental change to the way our swinging works this far along in the existing project. So we tabled it for Spider-Man 1. And then when Spider-Man 2 rolled around, and they said, hey, Jamie, do you want to be technical director again? I said, yes, but if we can explore that gameplay mechanic that I wanted to do for Spider-Man 1. And they said, well, okay, I guess. And I managed to negotiate a nice 6-month period of time where my team could work on this. And with the time and with lots of help from the other guys on the team, we actually made it into something pretty cool that we got the green light to go ahead with and ship the actual final product with. The rest is kind of history. Like, up until last year, when the new Spider-Man game came out for PlayStation 4, this game was kind of considered the best Spider-Man game ever. So 15 years is a pretty good run for a piece of gameplay, for a game to sort of like to hold the crown. The new game is great, by the way. They were clearly influenced by Spider-Man 2, but they took it and went farther with it and did things that we couldn't do because our hardware couldn't handle it at the time. So where's the clicker? So a little after I got invited to come talk to you about Spider-Man and my old history, I got a new job. By the way, how many people here have actually played Spider-Man 2? Oh, awesome. Really? Did you guys, I figured most of you would be too young. Did you play it on an emulator, or did you play it on an original console? How many played it on an emulator? Oh, all original consoles. Awesome, that's great. Okay, how many people have played this? This is where I work now. Yeah, I figured it would be more. So Spider-Man 2, I can't believe so many of you have played it. Like, it sold a few million copies, which I thought was a huge deal at the time, but actually in sort of the grand scheme of things, not that many. It's not the sort of thing where it's like, yeah, everybody's played it. Minecraft, on the other hand, it's hard to find somebody who hasn't played it or has a kid who hasn't played it. Spider-Man 2 sold what, 3 million units? Minecraft is at least 300 million. So I'm thinking, well, what will I talk about? Like, now I'm working on Minecraft. Maybe I can talk about the differences I've discovered. I took a pretty big break between my work at Treyarch on Spider-Man and working at Microsoft to do indie games. I was away from the corporate game development scene. I was writing in higher level languages, working on smaller projects, and then boom, I'm back into big team, corporate development, C++. Maybe I could talk about that. But I'm thinking about it and find myself telling stories about the old days, and I'm like, you know what? These guys are pretty young. So most of them are going to be still in school. Maybe some of them are interested in careers in the game industry. How many people are interested in careers in the game industry? Anybody? All right, a bunch. Good. I prepared the right talk. I'm going to talk about how my career in the games industry went, and maybe you guys can draw parallels. So the way I started was I had the right parents. So everybody go out and get the right parents. My parents, both PhDs in genetics from UC Berkeley, so nerd stuff was popular in my home growing up. And when I was 10, in 1980, let me set the stage here, very few kids owned their own computer. That was not a thing. I was one of, I think, 3 people in my elementary school who had a computer. My parents bought me this for my 10th birthday, a Commodore PET. Check out these stats. Yeah. Had a tape drive, so that was fun. You could program in BASIC with line numbers and go-tos. And had these weird square keys. Like this was good for a 10-year-old's tiny fingers, but nobody like over the age of 16, I think, could actually use these things. Who's this guy? Anybody know? This is Richard Garriott, aka Lord British, when he was very young. My parents, speaking of having the right parents, sent me to computer camp when I was in middle school. And Richard Garriott had just finished a game called Ultima and was working on Ultima 2. And he was sort of the celebrity counselor, the guest celebrity at this camp. He taught me how to program text adventures. He taught a class on making text adventures on the Apple II. I'd moved up to the Apple II at this point. And he was my hero. I was like, wow, you can make games for a living? That is crazy. I want to do that. And so I did hobbyist game development for a while. But it was sort of on and off. And, in high school, I got interested in, girls and drinking and stuff like that, and went to college and majored in psychology because that's what I was into at the time. But in college, I met these guys. That's Doan Koslu. This is Peter Ackerman after a champagne fight at a New Year's party. He doesn't drink, but he'll participate in the spraying the champagne part of it. After college, after I had my psych degree, I was like, what do I do now? Turns out these guys worked at a game company, and they knew I could code. I'd made a game or two in college that they had seen, and we'd worked together on some stuff. So they managed to talk the boss of a company called Mindcraft with a D, not an E, Mindcraft Software, into giving me a job. And so, boom, I was in the game industry, making money, $6 an hour. That, even adjusting for inflation, that was not very much back then. That does not compare to software engineer wages today. It was barely above minimum wage. That's the Mindcraft software logo. And I worked on we started working on DOS games for 16-bit IBM PC machines. And so the next step in my career was to learn stuff and work hard. I wasn't really old enough to ever program a machine that used punch cards, but programming a 16-bit processor machine in assembly language, because they'd already used up all the space they had for their C code, but we still had a little overlay buffer that we could swap assembly language modules in and out of that we programmed with. That was not easy. At the time, kind of took it for granted, but looking back, it's like, oh, how did I live? 16 bits, biggest number you can store conveniently, 65,535. That may sound like enough to do most things, but when you stop and think about it, there's more seconds in the day than that. If you do some math involving seconds in your game's going to have unpredictable behavior before the day is over. Never mind imagine if you're counting frames instead of seconds. Then you only get a couple hours before a problem might accrue. So our code was filled with this. every arithmetic operation we did, we had to check the overflow bit and handle that possible condition. I don't know. Can you imagine? Have any of you had to bother checking the overflow bit while doing computations? Nobody yet? How many engineers, by the way, in the audience? All right, good number. Yeah, I don't know. 30 years from now, maybe you'll be giving a talk on a stage somewhere, and you'll talk about what now seems like stuff we do today that now seems like, how did we live this way? How do we live without being able to, debug our network protocols or something? I don't know. How did we live with only 32 gigs of RAM? Okay, so Minecraft eventually went under, like most game companies do. Fortunately, I still had those same good friends, Don and Peter, and they decided they wanted to found their own game company. Does anybody recognize this logo? And if anybody plays Call of Duty Black Ops, they probably recognize this logo. So they hired me as the first programmer at Treyarch Software. And that was when things started to really accelerate in the industry. We were right on a turning point when we founded Treyarch. They were working on one of the first three-dimensional video games, 3D video games. It was called Die by the Sword. When they started working on it, Quake was not out yet. Tomb Raider was not out yet. We were doing some pretty cutting-edge stuff, and they'd managed to secure some investment funding. They managed to secure some publisher funding from Interplay, and we were off to the races. So the game industry was changing hugely at this point in time. We went to 32-bit processors, which was a boon. Like, we didn't have to keep checking the overflow bit. But it took me a while to realize that we didn't have to keep checking the overflow bit. It took me a while to sort of do the math and figure out, wait a minute, we can store up to like 4 billion now. And there's only 30 million seconds in a year. This program can run for a long time before an overflow is an issue. Before that year is up, we're going to have much bigger issues than whether our timer overflows. We went from assembly to C to C++. Treyarch was an early adopter of STL. You talk to most game engineers. Who here knows what STL is, by the way? Are we all? Okay, so C++ has this. In the 1,200-page document that is the C++ reference manual of today, a lot of it is devoted to the standard template library. And when you talk to game programmers back in the 90s, in the late 90s, and they saw STL and they saw the code it generated, they were like, keep it away. Don't let that touch my game code. It's going to be so slow. But I personally, and here's another one of my career steps, I write slow code. I pride myself on writing slow code. In general, safety, security, maintainability, not having bugs is always sort of my first priority. Speed comes later when necessary. And there have been times I've painted myself into a corner with this. The loading times on one of our games was atrocious because of the way we were doing file loading, for example. But for the most part, I've been able to be very productive and get a lot of stuff done without that many bugs, because of the way I prioritize things. And choosing to adopt STL early, back in the early days of Die by the Sword, was an example of that for the most part paid off. We used to, in the start with Treyarch and at Minecraft, we would share code on floppy disks. Called it SneakerNet because we're running around the office in our sneakers, handing disks to people. We have a whiteboard. It's like, I'm modifying this file, don't touch it. Source control became a thing, and by the time Treyarch was done, we'd gone from nothing to source safe to CVS to Perforce or a mixture of CVS and source safe to Perforce, and it was a lot to keep up with. A lot of game engineers washed out back then because making the transition from 2D graphics, where they're just transferring pixels from one memory buffer to another, to 3D graphics, where suddenly we all had to know linear algebra. That was a big jump for a lot of people. I did very well in linear algebra in college, so that's if you're going to get into games, study your linear algebra. And we went from being single-player experiences to network experiences. And Die by the Sword was an 8-person team. Spider-Man 2 was an 80-person team. That's how rapidly things ramped up. Now, I mentioned that there were some places where I painted myself into a corner with my emphasis on being correct rather than being fast. There were other really bad decisions I made. After Die by the Sword was done, we were like, okay, Die by the Sword 2, kind of a no-brainer. And we just recently heard a talk by Michael Abrash. He said that John Carmack, everybody knows who John Carmack is, yeah? Yeah? The guy who made Doom and Quake, now works at Facebook. When he went from Doom to Quake, his philosophy was always start over. You know, throw away all that old crappy code now that you've learned your lessons, start over from a clean slate, write some new beautiful code with, you know, unfettered by legacy code. And we heard that and we're like, yeah, and John Carmack is a genius, so that must be the right thing to do. Yeah, I strongly push, yeah, we got to throw away all our old crappy code. It was pretty crappy, by the way. We were, a lot of us were learning it as we went. Peter Ackman, the guy with the champagne on him, he was a mathematician. He wasn't really a programmer. He was learning C++ as we went. So we wanted that clean slate. But Interplay didn't want to do Die by the Sword 2. So what are we going to do? Turns out, this guy came back into the picture again. You know, I sent his company a resume after I graduated college before I ended up at Minecraft, and they never got back to me for some reason. They didn't, I guess, want a psych major with very little programming experience. Go figure. But now that we had Die by the Sword under our belts, and it was fairly popular amongst, you know, the coding and geek circles, they were like, hey, we got this, you know, franchise called Ultima with this Ultima Underworld sort of spin-off. Wouldn't it be also awesome if the new Ultima Underworld used the Die by the Sword engine, and we slap an Ultima Underworld coat of paint over it all, and call it Ultima Underworld 2 or 3 or whatever number they were up to? And we were like, yes, that sounds awesome, that's great. And here I am in the pitch meeting, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. We do need to rewrite our engine, though. And I watched the faces of all these sort of executives in this room sort of go from like being excited and pumped about making Ultima Underworld 3 to like, oh, you have to, why? Why do you have to rewrite your engine? And we're like, well, we made this bad decision and this bad decision. And they're like, oh, okay. And I didn't get invited to any more pitch meetings after that. Fortunately, I still had good friends, still had this guy. He talked to a smaller publisher called Crave, and they said, yeah, we would love to make a spiritual sequel to Die by the Sword. Can you do it in 9 months? And he said, sure. When he told us the new plan, I was furious. I was like, dude, games take 1.5 years to make. There's, you know, studies have shown, people have been doing this for a while. We've looked, we've seen the numbers. They take 1.5 years to make. Turned out I was right. That 9-month game really did take us 1.5 years before we finally shipped it. What was the alternative? Like, looking back, I think, what was the alternative? He could have said no. We could have ended up with no contract. We would either have to get a smaller contract with a different game and lay almost everybody off, or we had to, you know, take the risk. And he kept the studio afloat, and he suffered. He got an ulcer during the production of the spiritual sequel to Die by the Sword, which was called Draconis, and it was for the Dreamcast. But at the end of the day, Treyarch stayed afloat, and we got to the point where we could do some good stuff. They made me the lead engineer on the Tony Hawk ports. We made these for the Dreamcast, and we aced it. I gotta say. Now, making a port is a lot easier than making an original game, so it's not that big a deal. But made some really good decisions. I started reading management books, started reading Joel Spolsky. He's sort of he was a software engineering management guru online in the 90s. He invented Stack Overflow. And we did some clever things with source control. Source control was young back then. It's not like Git these days where it's kind of obvious how to do this thing. Back then it was like, how are we going to keep getting updates from Neversoft and their code base and patch them into the code base we're working on? How are we going to do that? We did something fairly similar to what you would do today in Git, but that wasn't like a first-class feature in the source control packages of the time. And I played the game a lot, so make sure there were no bugs in it. And because we did such a good job on these, Activision liked us, and they gave us the Spider-Man franchise to work on. There it is again, and things were looking good. And Spider-Man made tons of money, and Spider-Man 2 made tons of money, and it was time for the next phase in my career plan. Right. I gave talks like at GDC, like this. I got invited to other exotic cities, Singapore, London. I kept a blog. It was called Game Dev Blog. I haven't been maintaining it that much lately. I wrote articles for Game Developer and Gamma Sutra. I got my name out there, and I sort of became known as the Spider-Man 2 guy amongst that tiny subculture of who knows things, who knows that kind of things, and so I was ready for the next step in my career plan, which was to think I knew everything. It's like, yeah, I am a badass lead engineer. I'm going to quit my job at Treyarch. I'm going to start a new company that does things the right way, not my way. And so I quit Treyarch and went indie. And this was a great experience in some ways. Got to make a lot of games that I was very, very hands-on with, very much sort of my idea, my influence. But the downside is I never made much money. We were always just scratching by. I actually founded 2 studios since I quit Treyarch. First one with a friend. That one went under when we were chasing some publisher funding. Later on, I did it sort of all DIY. What can I do by myself? Just contracting out the art I need. Also, still, this way at least I can survive. I don't have other mouths to feed. But at the end of about a 15-year stint of trying to be an indie game developer, I said, you know what? It is time to call it quits on this. Not just because I wasn't making that much money, but also because it turns out I wasn't really enjoying it. And part of that was because I wasn't making much money, but part of it was because I realized something about myself, which is I like making games for me. When I have to make games that lots of other people like as well, that's not so fun. And I got lucky with Spider-Man 2 in that this really hard, esoteric, challenging game mechanic, took off. And I'm certain that it would not have if it didn't have sort of Spider-Man pushing it. Like, people picked up that game and got over the 10, 15-minute learning curve because it was Spider-Man. They wouldn't have done it if it was like Joe grappling hook guy. So turns out when you're 50 and you have been doing indie games for a long time, it's not that easy to find a new software engineering job. I applied to a bunch of places, and I'd get to the interview stage pretty easily, and then I'd screw up the interview. I'd never interviewed before. Like, I got my Treyarch job because I had friends, right? I got every career job because I had friends. I never had to go through the loop, as they call it. So I had to learn how to interview. I had to read those books on how to do a coding interview. I had to get on to LeetCode and solve the algorithm problems because the call for most of these algorithms that they teach us in school and that they ask us about in interviews, isn't that high in game development, actually. We need to know A* for pathfinding, but we don't really need to know what's a cool algorithm that I've never actually had to use. Tries, like we hardly ever use tries in game programming. And so, like the closest I got, like I did a really awesome interview at ArenaNet, the guys who make Guild Wars, and I was like, okay, I think I got this job. The very next day, I hear in the news that they're laying off a third of their workforce. It's like, oh. So, fortunately, when I was working on the Spider-Man games, a guy came in to interview for a design position, and he stayed in touch. It was really cool of him. Like, I'm pretty bad at staying in touch with people, but this guy, Max Slagor, stayed in touch, and he later on got a job elsewhere in the industry. He worked on Metroid games for Nintendo for a while, and then he ended up working in the Halo franchise. And so when I told him, hey, I'm looking for a job, he's like, hey, the Minecraft people work right below me. Let me talk to them and see what they've got. And so thanks to him, I finally landed a position. And I got to say, I'm glad. Like all the places that I interviewed and didn't get jobs, like Amazon and Facebook, like they didn't quite feel right. At the time, I really wanted the job because I didn't have anything, but this, now that I'm here, it feels like I landed in the right place. That said, it was with some trepidation that I'm jumping back into the world of corporate C++, big game development again. Like, things changed so much in the first 15 years of my career when we went from 16-bit to 32-bit processors and assembly to C++. Like, how much have things changed in the last 15 years? On the surface, not that much. Minecraft still supports 32-bit processors, ARM and stuff like that. We're still doing concurrent source control, still using C++. Minecraft people use STL a lot as game developers go, so even that's not that different from the way we were doing it before. But once I start digging in, things actually have changed quite a bit. We do also have 64-bit SKUs that we support. Minecraft runs on everything, so I'm surprised there aren't any 16-bit things that we try to port to. C++ has changed a ton. It's gone from, I don't know, a 600-page book to a 1,200-page book. We're not using Perforce. Perforce is super common in the games industry. Minecraft is one of the few places that uses Git. We get to get away with that because Minecraft doesn't have big binary assets. Git kind of sucks when you're dealing with like big textures, meshes, animations. Perforce is what you want for that. So I have to learn Git. That's an exercise. Git is its own strange beast. How many you all who here uses Git like knows it's yeah? Do you like it? I'm not going to have to deal with ray tracing. I'm on the network team at Minecraft, but most of my games in my past have been peer-to-peer netcode, and I didn't even do the full stack. Like I built on top of other services. I built my gameplay stuff on top of other services, and now here I am finding myself being the lead of a network team that owns the full stack. So it's like now I've got to learn how to do all those weird things that somebody else dealt with me before. The UDP protocols and the NAT punching and stuff like that, all the way up to the high level. Multiple cores is a thing now, right? Spider-Man 2 was one of the last single-core AAA games. After Spider-Man 2, the Xbox 360 came out, the PlayStation 3 came out, and it suddenly became all about multi-core. Almost all games support multiple cores now. I've dabbled with that a bit with one of my games, but that was in C#, where you have some safety nets. Doing it in C++, it is very easy to hit your thumb with a hammer. And I don't even know how many people work on Minecraft. We've got people all over the world, contractors, full-time employees. It's insane. And that communication overhead of everybody, like just last week, it's like I find there's a bug in the code. I trace it to this one line of code. Turns out it's this guy in Stockholm who wrote that one line of code. He's now working on he's working on Minecraft Dungeons now. I'm like texting him, hey, why'd you do this? He's like, oh, it was a performance improvement. It was a 10% performance improvement in our network bandwidth. And I'm like, oh yeah, kind of was. I guess I can't just take that code out. So I've been drinking from the fire hose for the past 6 months, basically, trying to keep up and learn all this stuff. Fortunately, who here knows about fixed mindset and growth mindsets? Is this a new thing for you guys? Okay, so this is super awesome. This is going to be inspiring. I'm definitely from a fixed mindset generation. Like when I was growing up, generally the attitude is like you either know how to do math or you don't. You either can figure out how to program or you can't. It turns out that's a super toxic attitude to have. It takes the wind out of your sails before you even get started. Somewhere around 2005, I think, a psychologist named Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset, and she studied this phenomenon of how if people just believe that intelligence is not fixed, if mathematical skill is not fixed, if programming skill is not fixed, they will have much greater chance of success in life, and teams that promote this mindset will have a much greater chance of success than teams that believe in you're either good or you're not. Treyarch was fixed mindset. Treyarch was like, and I was fixed mindset. I was like, okay, if you can't write some code to insert a node into a linked list, then we don't want to hire you. But that now I believe, no, that's something people can learn. There may be bad teachers who make it hard for people to learn how to insert a node into a linked list. Linked lists are pretty useless in general, but except for like interview questions. But there's sort of a good way to check if people can sort of handle a certain level of abstract thinking. That's why I liked linked list tests as an interviewer at Treyarch. But I'm tickled. I get to Minecraft, new employee orientation day, and the first thing they put up on the screen is growth mindset. Turns out Microsoft's new CEO, Satya Nadella, is big into the growth mindset thing, and he's made it part of his sort of personal mission to sort of instill this knowledge of growth mindset throughout the company. So it's like, yes, I'm at a place where I'm allowed to suck for a while before I get good. In the immortal words of Jake the dog, dude, sucking at something is just the first step to getting sort of good at something. So, yeah, I lied. This wasn't really a talk about how to get into the games industry. It was more just me telling you stories. I hope you were entertained. I will turn it over to you now. If you have any questions, ask me anything. Obrigado. And you can follow me on Twitter. I'm still maintaining one of my indie games as a side project. It's called Dungeon Life. It's on the Roblox platform. I'd love to have collaborators. It's open source now, and it's cool. It's a player versus player dungeon crawler where you take turns playing the monsters, keeping the heroes out of the dungeon, and the heroes trying to go into the dungeon. And every now and then, every couple months or so, I might put a blog post up on gamedevblog.com still. Yeah. Obrigado.
So, does anyone have questions?
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
I have two questions for you. The first question is more about plugin-related questions.
Money-related?
Minecraft plugins.
Oh, okay.
So I was wondering if there are future plans to make plugins broader, in the sense that we can make more stuff, we can add more content to the game, just like mods in Minecraft do, without players having to install them to join servers.
How would you how would you define the difference between a plugin and a mod? I'm not. I will say that definitely it is part of our long-term roadmap to make content creators' lives easier and better. I did a bunch of Roblox development. Like I was basically a content creator for Roblox, part of my indie career, and they have us beat right now in that area in content creation, and we want to catch up and beat them. It'll take a while, but it's something we want to do. But go ahead.
That brings me hope. Then the other question is more of a curiosity question. And what do you think, what is your opinion about an upcoming game called Hightail?
I don't think I've heard of it.
You never, you never heard of it?
Hightail?
Hightail.
Hightail. I have heard of it, but I know very little about it, so I don't really have an opinion.
It's a game that's being developed by Minecraft players.
Oh, okay.
And since, based on that fact, I think it would be interesting to hear the opinion of a developer of Minecraft.
I might be.
To know what they think about their players creating a game inspired in their own game and trying to do something that will take on every good aspect of your game.
Yeah, in general, I think it's very hard for traditional game companies to compete with modders. Like, just because there's so many modders, and they can make things that we never thought of, that we'd never imagined were fun or popular, and suddenly auto chess becomes huge. And it's like, who saw that coming, right? Like, and things of that ilk. It's like, and we're saying, yeah, we're doing our scientific approach to game design. We're doing our A/B testing, and then Adopt Me appears on Roblox, and it's just like, oh, why even try?
Okay, thank you.
Hey, so great talk. I also have two questions. The first one is, you had not psychiatry, but psychology degree. Was that ever useful in your career? Did you find that?
In two ways. One is sort of a psychological behavioral approach to making games. Has always been a thing. I've always been a big fan of focus testing, seeing what people think when they're playing the game. With Dungeon Life, I did the full-on A/B testing, statistical analysis type stuff. Blew the dust off of my statistics class from 30 years ago, trying to figure out how to apply what I learned back then. And also, as a lead, it's been very useful. Just being interested in the squishy stuff, like fixed versus growth mindset research. Like, most engineers don't dig into that, but I did, and that has helped me be a better lead, all through my career.
Okay, great. My final question is, I think 4 of your steps were about having really good friends and relying on them. I'm not going to ask you how to make good friends. I'm going to ask you if you want to be my friend.
Drop me a line on Twitter.
All right,
or dig up my email.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I got lucky, really, with friends. Like, I had met the right people. They kept in touch. It's like.
Okay, does anyone have another question? No?
First of all, it was a great talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had one question. Give me a second. So, would you do it all over again? Like, you told us your story. What would you change?
What would I change? This is interesting. So, when Peter and Doan founded Treyarch, they originally asked me to be one of the co-founders, and I said no.
Why?
I said, I don't think this is going to work, guys. And this is sort of like, when I talk about how Pete is a very positive guy, I'm the kind of programmer, who says that when I say that sounds optimistic, I mean it as an insult, right? But I realized there are studies who show that positive attitudes you're more likely to succeed with, statistically more likely to succeed with than negative attitudes, and I think it's quite possible that if I had joined Treyarch as one of those founders and I was in that pitch meeting where they said let's do Die by the Sword 2 in 9 months, I would have said, no way, and maybe killed the company. It's like it may have been a good thing that I was not one of the founders.
Thank you. Also, about those 15 years, you're like astray as an indie developer. How do you feel about them?
So it definitely had some positive things. Like I got to work from home a lot, so I got to spend time with my kids during their formative years, which was great. I wouldn't take it back. I wouldn't do it different again. Maybe I'd approach it with a different attitude. Mm-hmm. Maybe sort of recognize just how hard. Like when I started, I was like, I just made Spider-Man 2. Like this is going to be easy. Maybe I would have gone into it thinking, you know what, this is going to be a whole different sport from what I'm used to, and I'm going to have to get help and get mentoring and listen to a lot of feedback and work really hard.
Okay, thank you so much.
I have a question for you. So Minecraft has evolved a lot over the years. It's gone basically from a very small underground game to one of the more accessible and mainstream friendly games out there in the market. And my question is essentially how, now as a Mojang and Microsoft employer, how do you perceive the evolution of Minecraft over the years? And currently, how do you plan on keeping the game updated more into not just to please the new players that come into the game, but into the more veterans and who have stayed over the years with the game? I know that the game, that most of the old players don't really sometimes approve of the changes that have been made into the game over the years. So I would like to know your opinion regarding that.
Yeah, so questions like that are a bit above my pay grade. I really am pretty much just an engineer now.
Sorry.
If I'm going to channel the thought processes of the leads, and I also don't know exactly how much I'm allowed to say. For 10 years, we've been continually updating Minecraft, and mostly it's the team in Stockholm that drives that and sort of seems to magically know what people want and has magically helped the game grow year after year, day after day. And we're going to keep on doing that. We've got updates planned almost every quarter. Like we generally do 2 big updates a year, and then 2 sort of smaller. Just let's get a little something in front of the players in the alternate quarters. So that process has worked really well for us so far, and don't see it stopping. But we go back to community and supporting our creators. The community is such a huge part of what makes Minecraft what it is. People who love their particular mods, or people who love their particular servers. Supporting that kind of growth has always been huge for us, and empowering creators to help us has been super mutually beneficial.
Okay, thank you very much for answering. So the Q&A session's over. If you want to find Jamie, he'll be out there on our showcase area. A big round of applause for him. Okay, we will be now giving away the prize associated with Jamie's keynote. Okay, let's see who's going to win. Sorry for the small delay. José Afonso Batista Vieira. Please come on stage. Okay, thank you. Please head for the exit of the auditorium. The next keynote will start in 10 to 15 minutes.
O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas. A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia. O teu talento, a nossa paixão. O teu crescimento, a nossa partilha. O teu futuro, a nossa visão. Qual é a tua atitude? Na Everest, o futuro é teu. Traz a tua atitude. O nosso maior ativo são as pessoas. A atitude marca a diferença. O teu ritmo, a nossa harmonia. atitude.